28 years. That's how long I spent hunting white-collar criminals for one of Canada's largest insurance firms. I've tracked embezzlers through offshore accounts in the Caymans, caught executives cooking books with schemes so elaborate they needed flowcharts, and testified in court cases that made national news. My name is Russell Harmon, and I was damn good at my job. I retired 3 years ago with commendations, a solid pension, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd helped put away some of the country's most sophisticated fraudsters. What I didn't know was that all those years of expertise, all that training in spotting deception and following money trails, would mean absolutely nothing when it came to seeing what was happening in my own home. Because the person betraying me wasn't some faceless criminal in a boardroom. It was Celeste, my wife of 22 years. The woman I'd built a life with in our 4-bedroom colonial in Oakville, just west of Toronto. I need to stop here for a moment, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about trust, about marriage, and about the woman I'd wake up next to every morning for over 2 decades. It started small. It always does. That's the first thing they teach you in fraud investigation. Major crimes begin with minor anomalies. In September, I noticed Celeste had started going to the gym more often. 3 times a week became 5, then 6. She'd always been health conscious, but this felt different. She'd come home with this flush to her cheeks, this energy I hadn't seen in years. I remember thinking it was good for her. We were both in our late 50s, both feeling the weight of aging. If she wanted to dedicate more time to fitness, who was I to complain? Then came the phone calls. Celeste had never been particularly private about her mobile, but suddenly she was taking it everywhere, to the bathroom, out to the back deck, even on short walks around the neighborhood. She'd glance at the screen, see something, and her expression would shift. Not guilty, exactly. More like anticipatory. Like she was waiting for something. I told myself I was being paranoid. This wasn't like tracking financial irregularities at work. This was my marriage. But old habits die hard, and I'm trained to notice patterns. The real alarm went off in early November. We were having dinner. I'd made my signature beef stew, something I'd perfected over years of Sunday cooking, and I asked her about our investment portfolio. We'd been talking about adjusting our RRSP allocations before year-end. Standard financial housekeeping. Celeste had always handled our personal finances. She was meticulous about it, had a background in administrative work, and frankly, I was happy to let her manage the day-to-day money matters while I focused on my career. "Oh, I've been meaning to talk to you about that," she said, not meeting my eyes. She pushed her carrots around her plate. Celeste loved carrots. She wasn't eating them. I moved some things around, diversified a bit. Diversified how? Just into some different funds. Higher yield opportunities. I've been working with a new financial advisor. 28 years of investigating fraud taught me to recognize when someone's story doesn't add up. What advisor? We've been with Manulife for 15 years. Someone new. Someone who specializes in alternative investments for retirees. The way she said it, too rehearsed, too careful, made something cold settle in my stomach. But I didn't push. Not then. Instead, I filed it away. The way I would any piece of evidence that didn't quite fit. 2 weeks later, I found the receipt. Celeste had asked me to grab her jacket from the front closet. She was heading out to meet a friend, or so she said. When I pulled out her favorite camel hair coat, a piece of paper fluttered out of the pocket. It was a receipt from Tiffany & Co. at Yorkdale Mall, dated 3 days earlier. $847.50 for a men's leather wallet. I stood there in our foyer, staring at that slip of paper. My birthday wasn't for another 6 months. Our anniversary had passed in August. There was no reason for Celeste to be buying an expensive men's wallet, unless it wasn't for me. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I did something I'd never done in 22 years of marriage. I opened her laptop. I know what you're thinking. Invasion of privacy, violation of trust, all the things I would have agreed with a month earlier. But I'd spent nearly 3 decades following money trails, and every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. When you've seen enough financial fraud, you learn that the biggest mistakes happen when people ignore the warning signs. Her email was open. She'd never logged out. I started scrolling. The first few dozen messages were normal. Book club updates, emails from her sister in Vancouver, promotional content from Lululemon and Indigo. Then I found them. The messages that made my hands start shaking. They were from someone named Dominic Blackwell. The earliest one I could find was from 8 months ago, March. The subject line read, "Following up from our meeting at Oakville Town Center." I opened it, read it, then read it again. Celeste, it was wonderful to meet you yesterday. I don't often encounter someone who truly understands the potential of strategic portfolio diversification. Your insights about risk management were remarkably sophisticated. I'd love to continue our conversation over coffee. Perhaps we could discuss how my firm might help you maximize your retirement planning. Looking forward to hearing from you. Best, Dominic. Professional, polite, completely innocuous, except for one thing. Celeste had never mentioned meeting anyone at the town center, had never mentioned a Dominic Blackwell. I kept reading. The emails became more frequent through April and May, still professional, but increasingly personal. Dominic would mention details about Celeste's life, her love of gardening, her frustration with our daughter Emily not calling enough, her concerns about aging, things she'd told him, things she'd shared with this stranger instead of me. By June, the tone had shifted. I can't stop thinking about our lunch yesterday. You were radiant. July. Every moment away from you feels like wasted time. August. You deserve so much more than what you have. Let me show you what life could be. I sat in our home office, the one we'd renovated 5 years ago with the built-in bookshelves Celeste had wanted, and felt like I was watching my life collapse from the outside. This couldn't be happening. Not to us. We weren't one of those couples. We had our routines, sure, our comfortable silences, but we were solid, weren't we? The latest email was from 2 days ago. Can't wait to see you Thursday. Same place. I've made reservations at Canoe. It's time I treated you to something special. All my love, D. Canoe, the revolving restaurant at the top of the TD Tower in downtown Toronto. One of the most expensive restaurants in the city. I checked the calendar on her laptop. Thursday was tomorrow. She'd told me she was having lunch with her book club. I spent the rest of that night sitting in the dark, trying to process what I'd found. Part of me wanted to wake her up, demand an explanation. But the investigator in me knew better. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before I made my move. The next morning, I told Celeste I had a meeting with my former colleague in the city. She barely looked up from her oatmeal, just nodded and said she'd probably go shopping after her book club lunch. I watched her apply makeup with more care than usual, watched her select a dress I'd never seen before. Navy blue, fitted, expensive looking. She looked beautiful. She looked like she was trying to impress someone. I followed her. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to see this with my own eyes. I took the GO train into Union Station, stayed 3 cars behind her the whole way, watched her walk through the underground path system, her heels clicking on the polished floors, heading toward the TD Center. She moved with purpose, with anticipation. This wasn't a woman reluctantly meeting someone. This was a woman excited about where she was going. I waited outside the elevators that went up to Canoe, watched the numbers climb. Then I found a coffee shop across the street with a view of the TD Tower and settled in to wait. 3 hours later, she emerged. But she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, tall, maybe late 40s, expensive suit, perfectly styled salt and pepper hair. They stood on King Street, and he leaned down to kiss her cheek. A long, lingering kiss that made my chest tighten. Then he handed her something, an envelope. She slipped it into her purse without opening it, smiled at him in a way she hadn't smiled at me in years, and walked toward the subway entrance. I didn't follow her home. Instead, I went to a pub I used to frequent with colleagues after particularly difficult cases. Ordered a Guinness I barely touched. Tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do. The evidence was there. The affair was real. But something about it didn't sit right with me. Those emails, they mentioned investments, portfolio management, her firm helping with retirement planning, the Tiffany wallet, the envelope he'd just handed her on King Street. This wasn't just an affair. There was something else going on. That evening, I made a decision. I contacted someone I'd worked with for years, Trevor Huang, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases. If there was more to this Dominic Blackwell than just being my wife's lover, Trevor would find it. I need everything you can get me on this guy. I told him over the phone from my car, parked down the street from our house. I gave him Dominic's name, the email address, the description of the man I'd seen. Give me 72 hours, Trevor said. If this guy's dirty, we'll know. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I went through the motions at home, made breakfast, read the paper, pretended everything was normal while Celeste hummed to herself as she got ready each morning. That humming, she used to do it all the time when we first got married. When had it stopped? And why was it back now? Trevor called me on Saturday afternoon. Russell, we need to meet. Not over the phone. We met at a Tim Hortons in Burlington, halfway between our homes. Trevor slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts, documents, photographs. Dominic Blackwell, Trevor said. Real name probably isn't Dominic Blackwell. I can't find any legitimate registration for an investment firm under that name in Ontario. No IIROC registration, no MFDA membership. This guy's not a licensed financial advisor. My stomach dropped. What is he? Best I can tell? A romance scammer, but a sophisticated one. He targets middle-aged women, usually married, usually comfortable financially, builds a relationship, gets them emotionally invested, then convinces them to invest in opportunities that don't exist. I found 2 other women in the GTA who matched the pattern. Both lost significant amounts before they realized what was happening. One lost $130,000. The other wouldn't tell me how much, but I'd guess it was more. I stared at the papers in front of me. Bank statements, investment documents that looked official but were complete fabrications. Photographs of Dominic, if that was even his real name, with other women at restaurants, at hotels. How much? I asked. My voice sounded strange, distant. How much has Celeste given him? That's what you need to find out. Based on the pattern, he usually starts small, 10, 20,000, then escalates once he has their trust. The emotional component is key. He makes them feel special, desired, understood. By the time they realize it's a scam, they're in too deep to admit it. I drove home in a daze. This was worse than an affair. An affair I could understand, could process, could maybe even eventually forgive. But this? My wife had been scammed, manipulated, and given our money I'd spent 28 years earning to a con artist. I needed to know how much. That night, while Celeste was in the shower, I went through our financial records. The files she kept in the home office, the statements from our bank accounts. What I found made my blood turn to ice. Our joint savings account, the one that had held nearly $250,000 from my pension payout, and our combined RRSPs, it was down to $63,000, $187,000. Gone. Moved out in increments over the past 8 months. 10,000 here, 20,000 there. Then larger amounts, 40, 60,000 at a time. But it got worse. I found documents for a home equity line of credit I didn't know existed. Celeste had taken out a HELOC on our house, the house we'd paid off 3 years ago, the house I'd planned to leave to our children for $150,000. And she'd already drawn $85,000 from it. I sat there in our office, surrounded by evidence of a betrayal so massive I couldn't process it. Over $250,000, maybe more, gone. Given to a man who'd seen my wife as nothing more than a mark, a target, another number in his scam operation. The shower turned off upstairs. I heard Celeste moving around in our bedroom. I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. I needed a plan. I needed to think like the investigator I'd been, not like the devastated husband I felt like. But first, I needed to confront the man who'd done this. Trevor had found Dominic's address, a high-rise condo building in Liberty Village, one of those modern glass towers that had sprung up over the past decade. Expensive. The kind of place you could afford if you were regularly stealing 6 figures from vulnerable women. I didn't tell Celeste where I was going. On Monday morning, I told her I was meeting an old colleague about a potential consulting opportunity. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, a perfunctory gesture we'd fallen into over the years, and said she hoped it went well. The drive into Toronto from Oakville took 40 minutes in morning traffic. I parked in a green pea lot and walked to the building on Hannah Avenue. It was just past 9 in the morning. I'd timed it deliberately late enough that he'd probably be awake, early enough that Celeste wouldn't be with him. The lobby was all polished concrete and modern art. There was a concierge desk, but I walked past it with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Took the elevator to the 14th floor, Unit 1407. I stood outside the door for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. 28 years of confronting criminals, and I'd never felt this angry, this personal. I knocked. The door opened. Dominic Blackwell stood there in expensive loungewear, black joggers, a cashmere sweater. He looked confused for a moment. Then his expression shifted to something like recognition. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that could convince you to trust him. "I'm Russell Harmon," I said, "Celeste's husband." I watched his face carefully. This was the moment. In my years investigating fraud, I'd learned that the truly skilled con artists don't panic when confronted. They adjust. Dominic's expression shifted to concern, but it felt rehearsed. "Mr. Harmon, I think you should come in. We need to talk." That surprised me. I'd expected denial, maybe even a door slammed in my face. Instead, he stepped back and gestured for me to enter. The condo was immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Expensive furniture, original artwork on the walls. A bar cart stocked with premium liquor. This was what my money had paid for. Mine and however many other women he'd scammed. "Your wife has spoken about you," Dominic said, closing the door behind me. I knew this conversation would happen eventually. "Can I offer you a drink?" "I don't want a drink. I want to know how much you've stolen from us." He sighed, moved to the window, looked out at the Toronto skyline. "Stolen is such an ugly word. Your wife made investments. Willingly. Enthusiastically. Actually." "Investments in what? Companies that don't exist? Opportunities you fabricated?" "Mr. Harmon, I'm going to be honest with you, because I think you deserve that much. Yes, I'm not a licensed investment advisor. Yes, the opportunities I presented to Celeste were overstated. But she wanted to believe in them. She wanted something to be excited about." The casual way he said it made rage surge through me. "You manipulated her. You made her think you cared about her." "Did I?" He turned to face me. "Or did I simply give her attention she wasn't getting elsewhere? When's the last time you looked at your wife the way I do? When's the last time you made her feel desired?" I wanted to hit him. My hands clenched into fists, but I'd spent too many years in controlled, professional environments to lose it now. "How much?" I repeated. "You'd have to ask Celeste. I don't keep track of individual investor contributions." "Investor contributions?" I said bitterly. "You're a con artist, a thief. I'm an entrepreneur who provides a service. Your wife paid for my time, my attention, my companionship. If she chose to also invest in business opportunities I presented, that was her decision. She's not the only one, is she? There are others." That made him pause. His expression hardened slightly. "You've been doing research." "Of course you have. You were an investigator, weren't you? Celeste mentioned that. She said you were very good at finding things people wanted to hide. I'm very good at putting criminals in prison. Then I suppose we'll see how good you are." He walked to a side table, picked up a business card, and handed it to me. "This is my lawyer. Very expensive, very effective. If you want to pursue this legally, be my guest. But I should warn you, it's your wife who made the transfers. It's her signature on all the documents. And she'll have to admit to everyone, your family, your friends, the courts, that she willingly gave me that money. Are you prepared for that kind of scrutiny?" I looked down at the business card. Thornton Burke, a name I recognized. One of Toronto's top defense attorneys. This bastard had planned for this moment. "One more thing," Dominic said. "When you talk to Celeste about this, you might want to ask her why she really did it. It wasn't just about the money, and it wasn't just about me. Your wife has wanted out of your marriage for a long time, Mr. Harmon. I just gave her an excuse to start pulling away." I left without another word, took the elevator down, walked out into the cold December morning. My mind was reeling. The confrontation hadn't gone the way I'd expected. He'd been too calm, too prepared. And that final comment that Celeste had wanted out for a long time, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I called Trevor from my car. I need you to document everything about this guy. Every other victim you can find, every fake investment, every piece of evidence that he's running a systematic fraud operation. I need an airtight case. Russell, the police. The police will take months, maybe years. And he's right legally. Celeste willingly transferred the money. But if I can prove he's part of a larger criminal enterprise, if I can show a pattern of deliberate fraud, we might have a chance. I drove home. Celeste's car was in the driveway. I found her in the kitchen, making tea. She looked up when I walked in, smiled that same distant smile I'd become so accustomed to. How was your meeting? There was no meeting, I said. I went to see Dominic Blackwell. The color drained from her face. Her hand, holding the kettle, started to shake. She set it down carefully on the counter. Russell. How much, Celeste? How much have you given him? She closed her eyes. 30 seconds passed. Then she opened them, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my wife's face defeat. I don't know exactly. Maybe 270,000? Including the home equity line. $270,000. More than I'd even calculated. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Why? That was all I could manage. Why would you do this? Because he made me feel alive, she said quietly. Because when I'm with him, I'm not just your wife, or Emily and Nathan's mother, or the woman who manages the household finances. I'm just me, someone interesting, someone worth pursuing. So you gave him our retirement savings? You mortgaged our house? He said they were investments, that we'd make the money back, that. She stopped, shook her head. I know how it sounds. I know what he is. But by the time I figured it out, I was in too deep. And honestly, she looked at me directly for the first time. Part of me didn't care, because it meant I had something that was mine. Something separate from this life we've built that feels like it's been on autopilot for the last decade. You wanted to leave, I said, remembering what Dominic had told me. She didn't deny it. Not at first. At first, I just wanted something exciting. But yes, as time went on, I thought maybe this was my way out. Maybe I'd take whatever money was left and just start over. Without you, we sat in silence. Outside, I could hear our neighbor's dog barking. A car drove past. Normal sounds from a world that no longer felt normal. I've contacted a lawyer, I said finally. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm reporting Dominic to the police, to the Financial Services Regulatory Authority, to anyone who will listen. He's a fraud, Celeste. He's done this to other women. He'll keep doing it until someone stops him. I know, she said softly. I think I've known for months. But I couldn't face what I'd done. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. I'd protected myself the moment I found out, transferred my remaining pension funds into a separate account, documented every fraudulent investment, every transfer Celeste had made. My lawyer was ruthless. We went after the HELOC, argued that it had been taken out without my knowledge or consent. We froze what was left of our assets. Celeste didn't fight it. I think she was too exhausted, too ashamed. Our kids, Emily in Montreal, Nathan in Calgary, were devastated. They couldn't understand how their mother could have done this. I didn't try to poison them against her, but I didn't hide the truth either. As for Dominic, Trevor and I built a case that we handed over to the Toronto Police Service's Financial Crimes Unit. It turned out there were 6 other women we could identify, maybe more. The total amount stolen was over $800,000. Last I heard, the investigation was ongoing. These things move slowly in the Canadian legal system. But I did make sure that every financial advisor in the GTA knew his name. Made sure his picture was circulated in every fraud prevention network I had access to. Made sure that the next woman he tried to target would have at least a chance of discovering who he really was. The house in Oakville sold last month. I live in a condo in Burlington now. Smaller, simpler. I got back about 40% of what we'd lost through the divorce settlement and the sale. Not enough to retire as comfortably as I'd planned, but enough to survive. Celeste moved in with her sister in Vancouver. We haven't spoken since the final divorce hearing 6 months ago. I hear from the kids that she's working as an administrative assistant, trying to rebuild her life. Part of me, a very small part, hopes she finds some kind of peace. But mostly, I just feel empty. 22 years of marriage, 28 years of career expertise that meant nothing when it came to protecting my own home. All of it gone because I missed the signs, because I got comfortable, because I assumed that trust was the same as security. I investigated, I documented, I protected what I could, and I won, legally speaking. But it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like I spent 22 years building something that turned out to be built on sand. And when the wave came, all I could do was watch it wash away. That's the thing they don't tell you about betrayal. It's not just what you lose in the moment. It's realizing that maybe you never really had it to begin with. That the life you thought you were living was just a story you told yourself. And the person you thought you knew was a stranger who'd been waiting for the right moment to leave. I made sure Dominic's face ended up on every fraud warning list in Ontario. I made sure my wife faced the legal consequences of what she'd done. And I made sure our children knew the truth, painful as it was. But I couldn't make myself stop wondering when it started to go wrong. Was it years ago? Had Celeste been unhappy the whole time, just waiting for someone like Dominic to give her permission to destroy what we'd built? Or was it more recent, a slow drift that neither of us noticed until it was too late? I'll never know. And maybe that's the worst part of all. Not the money, not even the betrayal, but the fact that I spent 22 years sleeping next to someone, and I never saw it coming.